for a happy finale Friday. Today we are finishing book Scavenger. So I've got Mr. Bones with me here because he's been reading it with us throughout the entire book. I'm very excited to share chapter 42 with you, the end of book Scavenger, which means next week we will have a discussion and talk about our thoughts on the end of the book. Are you ready? Here we go. Chapter 42. Emily lay on her bed, finishing a book James had lent her called Rhyme Schemer. They planned to hide it at Pier 39 that evening when they went with their family to the lighted boat parade. There was a knock on the door, and her dad opened it, letting in the sounds of the Flush holiday album Matthew had been making the family listen to on repeat since Thanksgiving. "A package for you," her dad said, raising a medium-sized cardboard box he balanced on one hand. Emily jumped up and grabbed it. The Bayside Press logo was stamped on the top. "They're here!" she squealed. Mr. Griswold had said he was sending her advance copies of the new Poe novel. His final prize to her, James, and Matthew would be inside the book. "I have to tell James." She put the box down and raced to the window. A colorful strand of holiday bulbs dangled around her window, reflecting off the rain-flecked glass. She moved the antlers, the gold bug, and the raven box from the windowsill to the floor before sliding the window up and reaching for the pulley rope, now slick with rain. Her dad chuckled and left, letting the door close behind him. Once the bucket was at her level, she grabbed her notebook and scratched out a message. "And its books are here. Come over." Might be. There you go. And a special cipher, of course. The next 15 minutes seemed like the longest minutes she's ever waited for James to come down. She finished Rhyme Schemer and then paced her room until he poked his head in. "Finally!" Emily clapped her hands. James held up a thin paper bag with the logo on it for sourdough bread. "I thought of a good book stew," he said. "The clue can be something about lost bread, or a book that wants to be edible." He snapped his fingers, an idea occurring to him. "We'll make up the clue using altered poetry, like the character does in Rhyme Schemer." Emily grinned. "Yes, yes, yes. Brilliant. But first, look." She dragged a ballpoint pen across the tape sealing the Bayside Press box. The flaps opened up to reveal paperback books of The Cathedral Murders, a posthumous novel by Edgar Allan Poe. They weren't the final books, but Jack had said these advanced copies would be like a dress rehearsal before the official performance. Emily removed a copy and squeezed it between her hands, breathing in the paper smell. She flipped through the pages, wondering if the last prize would be another hidden puzzle. But it wasn't. It was a special mention in the introduction of the book. One fall day, Emily Crane and James Lee, two San Francisco middle school students, found what they thought was an innocuous copy of an Edgar Allan Poe book abandoned in a BART station. Little did they know that this book, a reprinting of Poe's short story The Gold Bug, would lead them on a wild scavenger hunt across San Francisco, culminating in the discovery of the manuscript for the very novel you now hold in your hands. So it's like an italicized introduction that's going to be at the front of the book. The introduction went on to tell the story of Mr. Griswold's plans for his game and how Emily and James unraveled all the clues. "I can't believe it. We're in a book," Emily exclaimed. "We're famous book hunters," James said. They spent a few quiet minutes looking through their copies of the new Poe book until Matthew poked his head in. His lopsided mohawk had been shaved away, leaving short and stubbly hair everywhere except for his long bangs. "Dad said the books are here?" Emily held one out to him. "Page 5, she said. After skimming the introduction, Matthew said, "There's nothing in here about my awesome kung fu moves to stop Mr. Amora." "That's because that only happened in your dreams," Emily said. "Oh, right." Matthew flipped his bangs out of his eye and smiled. "But you get a mention for the Maltese Falcon clue, and of course, Portsmouth Square." Matthew pointed to the bread bag on the floor. "What's the bread bag for?" he asked. James slid Rhyme Schemer inside the bag. "It's a book stew." Matthew made a face and shook his head. No. If you're going to dress up a book like a sourdough loaf, then you need to make it look more convincing than that. Hold on." Matthew left the room, and James turned the wrapped book this way and that. "I guess it does just look like a book in a paper bag." When Matthew came back, he carried a roll of toilet paper and sheets of newspaper. He crumbled a sheet of newspaper with one hand and gestured for the book. "You put the paper on top to add bulk, like a real sourdough loaf. Now." He nodded to the roll of toilet paper. Mummify them together so they stay in place. James wound toilet paper around the book as Matthew held it and the balled up paper in place. Emily opened the sourdough bag to check for size. Squash it down more so it will fit, she said. Emily smiled at the heads of her brother and James, bent together in concentration. When they finished stuffing the bread bag, Emily held up the concealed book, twisting it to view from all angles. Now that's a bookstoon, Matthew said. From the hallway, Emily's mom called. Time to head out, everybody. Let's hide it, James said. You ready, Em? I'm ready. And she was. She was ready to lean into their next adventure. The end.